walked up and shook his hand and go, hey, do you want to know about the quilt? And had a whole conversation about harm reduction. And so I think it's finding and very quickly being to assess that person and say, A, are they going to engage you? And B, is there some type of symbol there that I can pick up that I can introduce in a soft manner? Hey, do you have kids? I see this button. You know, I got a kid, this is my son, or whatever it happens to be.
Okay. Someone else?
I think it's going to be different a lot. It's a hard question because you've got to pick your audience and you've got to have message diversity. You've got to know how to talk to each individual person. And like that, she said, you can take that from a clue. I wouldn't necessarily go up to a mom and immediately approach her on it. I just start, like she said, a conversation in general. Oh, I see you have a child. You know, how do you feel about, or whatever. You know, that's a difficult question because every single person's different and they're going to need to hear a different message. So unless you've had a little bit of, even if it's just a ride up on the elevator in a hotel, and they happen to be down the hallway and you don't get to talk to them right then, but you kind of watch, you just have to pick up on when it's time. And when you want to say stuff. That's a really difficult question. You got these things here that have all the kids, you know, that have been arrested. That's a big time. When those women pick that up, can you believe, but how would you like it if your kid was on that thing? You know, they're arresting 1 out of 3 kids. That's the one thing I say to women. That would be a good one. Okay. Do you realize that 1 out of 3 kids, by the time they hit 23, is going to be arrested for a nonviolent drug offense? How do you feel about that?
Well, you know, as with me, I kind of feel the situation out as I did in the grocery store. And what I did with that man is I wrote Dennis Hill's link on his receipt, on his grocery receipt. Said, you have a computer. Go home and Google Dennis Hill. He's a biochemist that has resolved his prostate cancer as well with cannabis. So, you know, just shoot him some quick information. You may only have 5 seconds to say something to somebody. But the biggest thing is the arrest. You know, do you realize how many people are being arrested for marijuana? 1 person every 43 seconds is arrested for marijuana. It's pretty high statistics. And then, you know, that has actually led me into conversations about the private prison data, how they're proposing to keep prisons 90% full. How are they going to do that? With an easy market, and cannabis users are a very easy market.
I feel people out, as everybody was saying. I don't know. Any smokers in here know that you can look at somebody and kind of get that vibe, like, he smoked. Right. So when I get that vibe, you know, I talk to them, and I'll just give them a card, a Peachtree NORML card. If it's a woman, I would just suggest that you send her to the NORML Women's Alliance. Just tell her to Google it. It's great information there on how she can get involved in chapters everywhere.
One of the things I say when I'm talking to women is, you know, my wife tells me when women are involved in this, the game's over. Yeah. Yes, dear. Yes, dear. Yes, dear.
We need to get to the legislators, women.
Okay. I have sort of like a 2-part question. I have more experience dealing with the youth of my age in this problem, and when you guys were talking about synthetic marijuana, it kind of came, you know, closer to home because I've seen, you know, people who are abusing and turning on pharmaceuticals, but I saw someone who their whole face went white. They couldn't talk. They had to be dragged into a bathroom. They were vomiting. They couldn't make complete sentences for over like half the night because they smoked so much synthetic marijuana. And there are people who, in our own suburbs of Atlanta, kids who have died, who went to Dunwoody High School, like all these high schools that we all know that we send our kids to. You know, I don't want my kids to grow up and go to these schools and be exposed to these things. You know. But my question is, what do you think about marijuana as a treatment for anxiety and depression disorders?
There's a lot of research.
Yeah, there's a ton of medical evidence proving that it's good for anxiety, depression, ADD disorders. The medical industry has really exploded because we have 18 legal states and now DC that is putting in a dispensary as we speak. So the medical research is out there. You can go to YouTube or Google or any of those places and just type in cannabis and whatever you're looking for, like cannabis and diabetes, cannabis and depression, cannabis and skin ulcers. It's working on all kinds of things. So that the evidence is out here now. We have several major medical institutions, including the National Institute on Health, that just 2 days ago, on the 12th, 2 or 3 days ago, has finally admitted that cannabis does kill cancer cells in breast, colorectal, and lung cancer. So we're kind of at a tipping point on policy. We've got the government kind of backed in the corner going, okay, what do we do now? So it might be a little bumpy and scary for a little while, but I would definitely recommend cannabis for those kind of disorders. I know people that use it for those kind of disorders. I follow hundreds of patients across this country. And as far as the K2, I actually lobbied against K2 because they were selling it in North Carolina in convenience stores to 18-year-old children, and that absolutely disgusted me.
You can get it right across the street from
You can go in a convenience store. I bought a thing of White Widow in a round plastic container. It was actually called by a strain name of natural cannabis. White Widow is a strain of cannabis. So they called this fake stuff, which is like flower parts with this spray on it, looks just like pot in a little tub, White Widow, and they were selling it to 18-year-old kids, and that's just one brand. And we found also in some testing that some of the K2 actually affected your endocannabinoid system in a very negative way because it's synthetic. And in that light, I would encourage people to really look into more natural medicines, not just cannabis, because I take more than just cannabis. I take cactus and aloe and several things for my cancer. That have thrown me into remission, but I think cannabis being the biggest one with now our government is finally admitting it does affect these things. So I would really work in your state to keep K2 off the shelves. It's dangerous stuff. It's really dangerous stuff.
And I'd like to say I can recommend cannabis for anxiety and depression. Like I said, life was my gateway drug, and I went through a serious period of depression, just being at home with like children and not having money and hardly having food, and I was really depressed. And when I really started using cannabis, long story short, I'm a comedian now.
We're starting to run out of time, and we're 4 minutes away from happy time. I'll take one more question. One more question. This gentleman here.
For Ebony, a few years back, in Augusta at East College, or at Payne College, I attended a health fair for African Americans, and as a representative of the Georgia Transplant Foundation. And after our panel was over, I started kind of going around to other panels. And one of the panels at this health fair was on the explosion of AIDS, HIV in the African American community. And the panel was very clear on one of the major reasons for this explosion being the revolving door in and out of prison of young African American males. But that was very clear. Everybody in the room understood that.
Right.
There was not one single mention of the war on drugs as being the transmission belt which fed these kids.
Sending them in and out of prison.
Exactly. Is that, do you find that in your experience in the Black community as well? And how is that addressed, or is it being addressed?
Do I find what?
That lack of
awareness?
Lack of acknowledgement.
Yes,
of that.
yes, there's a definite lack of acknowledgement of a lot of things in the Black community. I think a lot has to do with a lack of education, a lack of knowledge about certain things. Because a lot of times we just take what the government says at face value, and we take what our preachers say at face value, and that's just what it is. So if we never have anyone say, well, here, look at the drug war, and that's why I talk to a lot of clergy. Look at the drug war, and think about how it has affected the members of your church. Maybe none of your members are in jail, but what about their sons? What about their grandsons? And so I think it's just facing the real issues. And like I said, I know families who are broken apart because when someone goes to jail, it's like, oh, it's that person. We want to look so good to each other and to society that we that's the black sheep of the family. That's one of the bad ones. When really, if we looked at it, and I have to say this, we have to look at the cause. Like we have to look at, why do I want to smoke? Why do I want to take prescription pills? If we don't deal with the cause, we'll always have a problem. And lack of education, a lack of being informed and reading books is a huge problem with our society at large. But I've definitely seen it in the black community.
I have one last thing to say. When we were going through this last election period, I kept hearing the war on this and the war on that and the war on women. The drug war is a war on our families. And somebody needs to start speaking up and telling it. And so we've got to fight this war, and I appreciate all of y'all being here and showing support for it.
We appreciate you.
With that, I just wanted to thank all of our panelists, and if we could get one more warm round of applause. And that officially concludes the first day of the Southern Cannabis Reform Conference. I would like to thank Peachtree NORML for putting on the event. And most of all, I would like to thank you for coming out to this historical event and being a part of it with us. And remember that tonight is our VIP party with the comedic genius of our panelist, Ebony and the music stylings of Chief Greenbud. It's $15, so come tonight and mingle with some of the greatest movers and shakers in the fight to end marijuana prohibition. The conference will resume again tomorrow at 9 a.m. And thank you, and just remember it's high time we talk about the benefits of marijuana legalization